Guys, so today is Wednesday technically, but I am on Sunday, and that's when sorry, I said dick because someone uploaded a video with the title dick in it, so I apologize. But I'm gonna upload this on Sunday, and I got a chance to make a video, so yeah, I know you guys like to see my face instead of my boobs in like an audio file. So this question this week is being a transsexual versus being a genderqueer, a CDer, or other identities you can identify as. How did you find out what you were? Do you feel it could change at any time? I'm going to answer the last question first. And the last question being, the answer to the last question is no. I'm not. I'm a transsexual. And I don't see that changing ever. But in order to get to the point where I could say I was a transsexual, I did, test the waters in other areas. When I first started, I called myself a cross-dresser, even though I really wasn't. I was I was a transvestite, pretty much. When I first started, and I was just, getting dressed to get fucked. But, I moved on from that, and that kind of translated into my daily life, where I started to kind of bring more feminine things into my daily life. And I got a job, actually, where I was, being introduced as a woman. And during that moment where I got the job, I was genderqueer. So I was kind of like guy that one day, girl the other day, queer most of the days, but, most of the time, never really committing to either or, and I really was into queerness and the juxtaposition of genders and things like that. But that was kind of, in retrospect, that was kind of me desperately trying to maintain a male persona that I knew people socially had already accepted. So it really wasn't legitimate. It was more of me just trying to, fit in halfway into their box, into someone else's definition of who I should be. But anyway, so I got that job and I was genderqueer, but I was being referred to as she all the time. And through that, I kind of just started to recognize that, whoa, almost cut myself with my newly painted finger. I kind of started to realize that, like what I just said, like I wasn't really male identified. I was simply physically and genetically male. So I was holding on to that aspect of myself. In reality, I like being a girl. And because the thing you have to understand about me is, if you look back in my early years, there were a lot of signs of me being trans. I have a distinct memory of dancing in my in the living room of my parents' house, and my dad told me to stop dancing like a ballerina. And I have a lot of different memories from way back when, where my father told me to stop doing certain girly things when I was very young. And even to when we were playing tag, there were the girls and there were boys, and I was always on the girl team, because no one had accepted me as a guy, because it's at that weird time in life where people, gender is just now becoming apparent, but you still play together. Anyway, so there are a lot of things that I had to rediscover about myself. And, through kind of testing waters and different identities, I then finally came to the decision and understanding that I was actually a trans woman. And that could be the explanation for all of my awkward feelings and all of my self-hatred and all of my depression and stuff like that. It was just simply because I was trying to fulfill a role that I would never be able to fulfill. I just am not a man. I just have not ever been a man. So right now, you know, I'm the opposite of a man. I'm the opposite of a man. you know, um, so yeah, that's kind of how it was for me. But I will mention that there have been phases in my life where things have been juxtaposed. Like when I first cut my hair, I'd kind of really, I liked it in a way. I hated it in retrospect, but I liked it in a way because it kind of made me feel more queer. Like I felt like a queer woman. Like I had been a queer man, and now at that phase of my life, I was a queer woman. And it's very interesting to feel the difference because there's male interpretations of femininity and there's female interpretations of masculinity. And if you look at people in their transitions, really, you can see very early on female interpretations of masculinity and male interpretations of femininity. And, a male interpretation of femininity, long hair, makeup, all that stuff. And I'm not saying this is all people, and the inner feelings and the inner cues that women have, they lack because to them, being a girl is makeup and hair and dresses and skirts. But to a woman, a lot of that is just natural. And, a lot of trans women, we eventually fall into that. But, a lot of times when you start out, it looks like a little girl in mommy's high heels. The same goes for female to males. It's like when a woman starts transitioning into being a male or being a man, they cut their hair, they bind their chest, they act aggressive because that's their female interpretation of masculinity. And so when I cut my hair, I had longer hair. I had finally cut my hair, and that's what I associated as a female interpretation of masculinity. And I kind of dressed a little bit more butchy, but butch in sort of a more feminine way, a very tomboy femme type way. You know, but that was interesting to be on both sides of that, and that's like when gender becomes juxtaposed because you can be a transgendered woman who is queer and you can be a transgendered man who is queer, and those are all possible. I don't think that my queerness from this point in my life forward is going to ever be juxtaposed further than me perhaps wearing a female garment based on a male garment. You know what I mean? Like a female suit or something like that. But, because that's just how I am. That's where I am in my life. And I think, I think it's very healthy to explore all different identities and gender. Because, you don't know sometimes. Like for me, it was very hard for me to come to terms with being a transsexual. It's very hard. Of course, when I initially accepted it, it just made sense and things just became easier. But it was very hard for me to accept that I was going to be a transsexual and that I was going to change my life and I was going to get on hormones and do all this crap. Especially since when I first started my transition, transition seemed so dreary to me. It just seemed like I would never look like a girl. I would never have a boyfriend. I would never, live a normal life. And here I am, 4 years later. Normal life, boyfriend, pretty heteronormative. So it's like, things change and it gets better. But, I did explore a little bit, but I don't think it's going to change. I can't envision a time in my life where I wake up and say, you know what? I've gotten all of these hormones and I got all these surgeries and I've legally changed my gender marker and I've also changed my name. But you know what I think would be best for me? I think it would be best for me to be a man again. I'm going to take my boobs back. I'm just going to become a female to male transsexual. I've already gotten the surgery. I just got to get the phallus surgery. Take a graft from my arm and make a penis out of it. I would not, I would not want. I don't think that's ever going to happen. I really can't. And I think, honestly, a lot of people on this channel are probably going to feel the same way, especially since one of the silent requirements for this channel is being in transition. So, yeah. So that's my video. I'm so glad that I got to make it before my dad came back home. I will upload this on Sunday, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.